Parliament thought that was pretty serious. Well, I'm joined now by Aunt Lehane, policy lead at Cranston, a harm reduction charity. And thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Sir Jacob.
Thank you very much. How do we square this circle? Because it must be right to look at other ways of making the drug laws work, because they don't work. You're a harm reduction charity. How would you like to see the law reframed?
It's a very good question. As you say, this is a prosecution policy which was legislated or sort of given prudence by the Lord Advocate. Now, in an ideal world, OPCs, drug consumption rooms, call them what you will, would be legislated by Parliament. In fact, the Home Affairs Select Committee recently recommended this pilot scheme as recently as about a month ago, I think it was, including a GB News presenter, Lee and some of your Conservative colleagues. Of course, that would be an ideal world, but the fact of the matter is that Scotland has the highest drug death rate in Europe. It's doubled the next country. The whole of the UK has an incredibly tragic high level of drug-related deaths every single year, and it remains among the highest. However, without action from Westminster, without action on recommendations such as the report from the Home Affairs Select Committee, Scotland is left with no option. Now, I agree with you. I think it would be most pertinent, most safe for this to be written into Westminster legislation, but they don't have the option, and I guess you can't really sit there and let people tragically die from preventable deaths without taking action.
No, that must be right. You certainly want to stop preventable deaths. But isn't there something worrying when a prosecutor just decides, well, I won't enforce this law? What other laws will she decide not to enforce? And doesn't that then make the law arbitrary, and that citizens in Scotland won't know whether they are following the law or breaking the law, according to somebody unelected and unaccountable?
Now, I agree with you in that. I think having guidance and a prosecution policy which is put forward by the Lord Advocate is not the ideal situation, because it does create a non-uniform approach to policing. You know, if you're south of the border, you would be, or if you're outside of Glasgow in this pilot scheme, you would be arrested for the possession offence, but you wouldn't be if you're within that. This is not an ideal situation. However, it's a reaction to an emergency situation whereby action is not being taken, and I'm sure you know politely from your Conservative colleagues and from the opposition too, that drugs has become a wedge issue whereby people want to be tough on drugs irrespective of the evidence. Now, the evidence shows that in 18 countries very similar to our own, including Switzerland, that these work. There are 200 in operation. We had 1,051 people die from drug-related deaths in Scotland in 2022 alone. I don't believe anyone's ever died in an OPC, or at least if they have, very few people have died. How can we not take action?
Scotland's figures, as you pointed earlier, are dramatically worse than other countries, dramatically worse than the rest of the UK, and have been deteriorating at a sharp rate, whereas the rest of the UK has been pretty stable. So there do seem to be some particular factors in Scotland. But do you think the Home Office is right when it says that there is no safe level of drug consumption? Should you always be looking to get people off drugs and to stop the supply of drugs?
I think it's a very good question, and I'd respectfully say that the UK as a whole, England and Wales, actually, their figures, which are recorded separately, as I'm sure you know, there was a 9-year increase in drug deaths. They're at unprecedented levels and have been for at least 5 years. That's a 9-year increase. Now, behind Scotland is England and Wales in the drug death figures, the number of people who die from drugs. So we're not doing brilliantly in England and Wales, respectfully. And in regards to what we could do better, we clearly need to look at globally evidence-based policies. We want to be looking outward as a country to do what works and to protect people that need help. In terms of the point, around Scotland and drug deaths and why it's a particularly bad issue there, I think there was a cut to drug treatment budgets by the SNP in 2016, 22%. That does have to be acknowledged. However, there also has to be acknowledgement that places like Glasgow, Dundee are some of the most deprived countries, deprived cities in the United Kingdom, and the drug death figures fell very incrementally in 2022 in Scotland, but in the deprivation figures, they did not fall. This is an issue of deprivation and of class.
Thank you very much. This is a subject we'll have to come back to because it is a really important one. But thank you for joining me
Sir Jacob.
this evening. That's all from me. Up next, it's Mark Dolan. Mark, what is on